Good morning, all, and welcome to our latest Consumer Duty Unwrapped webinar. We host a number of these webinars throughout the year in our what we call Unwrapped series, which is really designed to get a grip of an understanding, in-depth, granular understanding, really, of where the regulator are on key directives, and in this particular case, we're focused on the Consumer Duty Board report, given that we have the deadline on the 31st of July this year. So what we've done slightly differently on this webinar is we are hosting a live demo of our own technology once we've run through the key areas where we see our challenges and opportunities and where firms need to be, so you can better benchmark where you currently are as a business. So we're going to run a live demo on our automated solution for the Consumer Duty Board report through our AI RegTech platform model office. And then we're also delighted to host John Netting, COO of BareRock. BareRock are a new insurtech in the professional indemnity insurance market. And John has a vast experience in compliance, having worked with Sense Network for many years. And prior to that, he also, like me, was an IFA and worked as an advisor in the industry. So John will position what BareRock do, how BareRock can help firms not only on the PII front, but also obviously today with the Consumer Duty Board report. So what we're really looking at is, as we see it, the FCA are certainly coming at things full on. And if you are an avid reader of their Dear CEO letters, which they produce on a regular basis at the moment, the telling one for us was the one sent through to our side of the industry and the wealth management and stockbroking firms on the 8th of November 2023, and where they're basically effectively saying that they're now going to be far more assertive, intrusive, proactive, data-driven as a regulator, and that therefore throws the gauntlet down to firms like your good selves to say, are you data-led? Are you applying data analytics to your compliance needs and activities? And can you report on that data, ideally at the click of a button? Because what we're seeing now in the market, there is definitely an increase in supervisory activity and interventions with the FCA. And what we've seen here is a great example of the type of data that they're now requesting firms to be delivered in a meaningful format within a 2-week timeframe. And if you read the FCA papers as well, the TR Thematic Review 24/1 that came out in March this year, which is focusing on the income retirement advice element, which is effectively the latest suitability paper, that they were throwing down kind of key warnings about the fact that the quality of client files was poor, and also what we've got is key issues around the fact that firms couldn't report on the data requests at all. So the most important thing here is that the FCA are walking their talk in their rigorous approach to supervision activity, and the advantage that if we play that back into the world of data and how you're collecting data within your businesses and how you're applying that in this case to the Consumer Duty Board report, these are the kind of data areas that you need to be focused on to make sure that you can take a look at a key strategy that you can put in place with the business so that you can identify and monitor that report data. You can take a look at the existing data that you've got, clean that data up, hopefully, take a look at all the key areas in your business around the 4 outcomes, for example, of the consumer duty, the cross-cutting rules, foreseeable harms, and so forth. But the most important thing is, as I will mention throughout today, as I'm sure John will as well, is it's all about ensuring that you've got the available data, it's up to speed, it's up to date, it's real-time data, so that you can then feel comfortable that your board reports are populated accordingly, and reflect the fact that you've got great evidence-based practice. And what we do at Model Office is really looking at ensuring that you've got that third line of defense through the audit strategies and activities that you've got in your business to showcase that you're doing really good stuff, and you've got the finger on the pulse across all these key data areas. The other thing to mention as well is that the FCA are also very keen. If you remember, the FCA launched in 2013, now 11 years ago, in and around behavioral economics. And so client behavior, so the soft facts stuff, is really, really important for the board report. Because at the end of the day, you do exceptionally good work with your clients. You work hard to ensure that you've got all the relevant facts, hard facts, soft facts, to then deliver appropriate and suitable advice going forward, which also meets the FCA rules and regs. But what we need to ensure is that soft data isn't forgotten, and that is front and center of how you are pre-populating across those 4 outcomes in particular, around what the good work that you're doing and how you are ensuring that you can evidence that you're supporting good client outcomes on an ongoing basis. You're avoiding foreseeable harms. You're identifying, monitoring, and managing and supporting vulnerable clients in whatever areas. So really, the key area now where the FCA are is effectively, they're kind of like doing 3 things. They're looking at personalization, ensuring that the client needs are front and center, and firms know their clients and collect data on their clients like never before. You've got the democratization, if you like, to hopefully get more clients served by the industry, hence the advice boundary that's coming through. And then you've got the standardization piece where the board report sits, which is ensuring that you've got those standardized reports to offer to your board. And if you are a small business, at the end of the day, your board is you, your senior managers. You'll have SMFs under the senior manager certification regime. And so it's collating that information in a meaningful format so that you can standardize it and then showcase all the good work that you're doing in the business. And also, most importantly, where things aren't going as well as you'd like them to go, you're showcasing that you're taking activities and actions in that area to rectify. The key area that we see a lot that's kind of missed, and there's a couple of things really. The first thing is obviously a focus on vulnerable clients in vulnerable, or customers in vulnerable circumstances. And we work closely with the Consumer Duty Alliance, who are doing great work in this area and much more, particularly around the Consumer Duty and the board reports and so forth. If you haven't engaged the Consumer Duty Alliance, I'd highly recommend you engage with them. We're affiliates of the Consumer Duty Alliance. So what this is looking at really is looking at the FCA vulnerability framework, applying that across your business, how that's embedded in to your strategy and vision, your products and services, your processes and technologies, data analytics, and so forth. But the most important thing when it comes to your board report is looking at these key metrics. Customers' true income, its sources, stability. How are you assessing all this? Have you got the regulatory savings, their pension contributions? Have you got the finger on the pulse on those areas? Level of spending, patterns associated with credit risk or conduct risk behaviors, erratic cash movements, and so forth. So really, a lot of this is elementary to a lot of you out there, because you'll do this already with your fact finding, and also client portals, for example, are great to capture this information, and open banking if you employ it, because open banking technologies can pull through all the client details, the client bank details, and so forth, and so that you can get a better handle on the trend analysis and gap analysis for clients, for clients' activities as they're managing their money going forward. The other area that, again, firms need to really focus on is take a traffic light approach, if you like, a RAG approach to their distribution chain. and where you sit within the distribution chain. As I've mentioned throughout these these webinar series, advisors and planners and wealth management businesses have to look both ways and have responsibilities across all the value chain, to the clients, backwards to the platform investment managers, fund managers, and so forth. But the most important thing here is focusing on your research and due diligence, capturing all that data, making sure, for example, if you're using centralized investment propositions, centralized retirement propositions, portfolio management services, that all that data from what we would class as critical third parties is collected in a strategic manner, that you've got a framework around it to ensure that it's up to date, it's real time, and you can report on that within your Consumer Duty board report. The other area is on segmentation. Again, we are seeing still in the marketplace that firms still need to do some work around this. And this is an example of how you could apply segmentation to your business. But the key area here, when it comes to the board report, it's a great way to strategize and take a look at, have you got the right data across the segment, and looking to ensure that they've got the right investment solution to match their needs. Platform selection is right, facilitating their investment approach and strategies, helping you as a business to report on that. Also throws in the other technologies that you're using, practice management, for example, technologies, back office technologies, and is that providing you with all the right information and data on a CRM basis, income reconciliation, and all that stuff. And then you've got the reviews and the vulnerable circumstances and the costs to that you're charging clients, and how you're doing that cost benefit analysis, because a big part of proof of value, which is a very old regulatory concept, is have you got that cost benefit analysis where you are effectively showcasing to the regulator as well as your clients that you're offering high value on an ongoing basis to your clients. And client segmentation strategy can certainly help you with that. So just summing up here, before I hand over to John, what we've got here is looking at 3 areas that we would recommend that you stress test where you currently are and benchmark where you currently are against the FCA requirements on your Consumer Duty board report. So the first area is monitoring your results, and that's how are you defining good outcomes? What is it you define? Now, we live in this wonderful world where we have a principles-based framework. So we have to interpret really what the FCA was, for a highly subjective process, what the FCA want and need, pull that back into our businesses and what we're up to, and then tweak it as we go forward, which actually I think is a really good system, because it allows you freedom to interpret the rules and develop your businesses as you go. But you're going to need things like RegTech, right, technologies to ensure that you're stress testing and providing those third line of defense to ensure that you're defining good outcomes in the right way. Provide granular metrics, risk management. So again, it's looking at what tools are you using within the business to ensure that you've got that gap analysis sorted. Are you just relying on spreadsheets? Are you just relying on CRM systems, or checklist tick boxes, strategies and activities? And if you are, then I'd invite you to really focus on applying new technologies that are coming through, like Model Office, to ensure that you're automating some of it, taking control, if you like, of that activity, because it's really important you get that right. Data quality and completeness. Obviously, rubbish in, rubbish out. You need to ensure that you've got the right data. You need to ensure you stress test your data at all times. So that's going to be really important. Sales and marketing activity, financial promotions comes into that, ensuring that you're monitoring all those results and they're hitting the rules in the right way, and comparing outcomes across client segments I mentioned earlier on that client segmentation piece. Actions taken, answering that so what question, root cause analysis, business strategy, impact and changes, and then finally evidencing good outcomes. How are you doing that? And ensuring that you've collated all that data, and we'll talk about the structure of the board report as we go through with the demo that I'll show in a minute, and also the interview the fireside chat that we've got with Mr. Detting. And finally but not least, you'll see this in our board report, but really this is a slide just showcasing what the FCA want you to include in your board reports, how to effectively build that framework in so that you can then sense check it on an ongoing basis. Consumer duty is not once and done. FCA's words, not mine. And I would say your consumer duty board report isn't once and done. I would invite you to ensure that you're actually looking at and calibrating and revisiting your board report at least quarterly in the business to ensure that it's all up to speed, it's monitoring it in the right way. And with our automated solution, you can click a button and you can have that board report whenever you feel that you need it. So I'm going to hand over to John.
Thanks, Chris. I think that's the quietest I've ever been at the beginning of a presentation. So, no, thank you very much for that. Yeah, I think I'm very, very acutely aware that we're a new offering in the market for your PI insurance. So, Chris very kindly said that we could just cover off a couple of slides before we get back into talking properly about the Consumer Duty Board report. So, I think as a starting point, if we look at what we're doing with it on a sort of conceptual high level, is we are trying to create a healthy new ecosystem. That's where the name BareRock came from, by the way. It is, as you can see on screen, a new environment where hopefully a new species can thrive. And that's what we've sort of challenged ourselves to do, is to look at every element of PI and look at each individual part of the process and of the service and what could be improved and how it could be improved. Okay, going to move on, Chris. The biggest and most fundamental change that we wanted to apply is to turn the market model on its head. So what we see in the legacy market is that the market-based rate takes precedence and not the individual firm qualities. So we've flipped that model upside down so that what we do when we gather the information is that we analyse it at an individual level. And that does mean we ask more questions, but we ask more questions to understand a firm properly. Firms tell us that what they've historically had to do is to write lengthy covering letters to try and position their firm on top of the application forms they fill in. We want to move away from that and get to the position where we're asking more information and drilling into the shape and the format of a business. And the logic there is that when we've got that information, it means that we can rate and look at the individual qualities and give that more precedence than that generic market risk. Okay, move on, Chris. Okay. Having data, and data is going to be a theme of the day, of this session, I think. Data-led decisions is equally critical for us. So not only have we got now an online proposal form, as I've mentioned before, where we're gathering more information, more what I refer to as more quant-based, less quant-based and more qual-based information, so that we understand the shape and risk of a firm to a greater degree. But we're also connecting information directly through API from the FCA register, from Companies House, to make the process more efficient, but also to get richer data. And we've also linked back to our claims data so that we can pull that information in, so that overall that can guide the policy rating and make sure that we're giving bespoke cover and bespoke pricing. Okay, move on again. Okay, all of this is leading us to our, well, effectively, what is our strapline? Good companies in good company. What we're trying to do is to deliver a service that's targeting and working with and for the benefit of effectively a club membership of good companies. So if we just click through one step further, basically what we've done, and it's interesting, we've got two key words have come through on my last couple of slides. The first one was data and the second one is segmentation. We've done the same with our customer base. So we've segmented and looked at criteria how we can segment the risk of our potential customers. Firstly, we use that segmentation to say what we don't want, and we've got a very defined target market. We want to work with firms that take regulation and compliance seriously. So even getting access to the club and being offered insurance through us is and should be viewed as a bit of a kite mark. So we've got the club membership. But where through the data we're gathering, we can see firms that have good good practice and repeatable and defensible procedures, and therefore pose less risk from the PI point of view, you can go up our membership level to Club 10, Club 20, where you get 10%, 20% discount. So we want to reward and recognise that good practice from the firms that we insure. So that club membership is really important. If we just flick onto the last little slide, just to summarise that graphically, basically what we're trying to do is work with the better firms, the ones who take it seriously. They effectively sit in that ring-fenced club protected environment. That effectively means that we've not got the contagion risk of bad firms coming in because we've filtered them out through our process. That means that we can insure firms and safeguard them in a safer environment, which should give stable PI premiums. And it means that we you know, when that next FCA review happens, we've got a higher probability that the firms that we're insuring and that are in the club with you are of better quality, and therefore we don't have to knee-jerk react in the way that the legacy market does to emerging risks, because we've got a higher probability that the firms that we look after have done whatever that is well. Okay, but at the same time, well, let's recognise and reward those elite firms and give them better and safer cover. So that's basically what we're doing. There's lots of other things that we've done and lots of other marginal gains that we've done in designing the process, from multiple payment options through to a new policy wording that's clearer and fairer and helps with claims, for example. But they're the core concepts of what we've tried to do. Thanks very much, Chris. And back to you.
Thanks, John. Great stuff. And yeah, we're delighted to be working with BareRock. We're one of the 5 technology partners who BareRock have partnered with, and we see great opportunity bringing it back to the Consumer Duty Board report, because all the data that you're collating in your business is going to help you ensure that you can evidence that you are walking your talk on your risk management within your business. And the knock-on effect of that over time, when we talk to John a bit later in a few minutes, is that effectively you should ideally be getting favourable renewal rates. But we'll talk about that in a little while. So I'm going to now show you a live demo and bring this to life for you. I'm going to turn my video on, actually, because to ensure that you don't realise there you go. I'm not an AI avatar. Okay, that's the most important thing. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how Model Office are showcasing, are basically put together and built a automated version of the Consumer Duty Board report. Because what we're doing is we digitize the FCA handbook and break it down into 6 constituent parts. Today, we're interested in the consumer duty itself. And so what you can see here is that initially, once a firm has answered question sets, diagnostic, assessed themselves and audited themselves against all these regulations that you have to deal with in each of these 6 areas, in this particular case, the consumer duty, we're breaking this down into its constituent parts like so. And then we call these business functions, but think of them as governance, risk and compliance modules. So once a firm has got their regulatory score, which is all heat mapped automatically using AI, we're also got at Model Office, we've now got nearly 1,000 firms on our platforms. So it will also automatically benchmark you against your peers on the platform about how the best firms are performing, and give you a 1-year target just to nudge you forward. But here what we've got is the individual scores a firm has scored across the individual areas. So consumer vulnerability, for example, is a decent score. But what the algorithms will do then is pull in and automatically provide what we call dynamic steers with resources that you can click on to actually gain far more information about where you might want to improve or need to improve these areas. So again, it's providing you with lots more information, which can then be taken and pulled through to your Consumer Duty Board report, which you'll see in a minute. And then it will give you dynamic steers below, which is really focused on the areas that you might be falling slightly short on. Gap analysis process, all automated, so that you can then take action. And all these areas have links in. Most of them have links in the more technical areas to the regulatory rules, so that you know where the resources are, and you can benchmark yourself and audit yourself, and then have that resource to improve as you go. So we, a while back, a couple of years back now, we built the action tracker, which is automating the gap analysis and audit report for a firm. We built this originally with Rory Percival. Some of you may remember, ex-FCA. We worked with Rory for a couple of years, and he helped us enormously with the action tracker. And what Rory did is effectively across all the question sets in Model Office, where you were basically stress testing that area of subjectability, subjective area about how you're interpreting the rules into your business. Then what Rory did was he basically put a static traffic light system in to say the question that you're asked turns into an action, which is either a high risk significant rule breach, medium risk rule breach, or a green good practice area. And so what we want to do then is really focus from a consumer duty board report perspective on obviously the consumer duty. So you can see top right here, we'll click on that. And this then really pulls everything, filters everything down to all the areas that the FCA are saying that you need to have in your board report, and what you have done as a business and how you've benchmarked yourself against the consumer duty rules in here, so that it showcases what you need, what you've done well and what needs a bit more work, and then it can pre-populate that board report. So what we've got here then is we filter down each of the areas, because what we want to do is avoid overwhelm, where you've got lots and lots and lots of areas to get involved in that you might need to do some work on. So we can then go into the areas, the business functions that we call about it. So let's go into vulnerability, and you've only got these areas now to focus on and get stuff done around. So click on one of those areas, and then it will take you into the question set that you've been asked. Gives you the link into the, in this case, it's the FG 21.1, the FCA paper, but also gives you chapter and verse where you need to go, chapter 3, and the clauses and so forth. You can add it into your calendar and update your calendar accordingly as an alert. It will give you alert if you go over the target remedy date that we set. And then you can update the answer to the right level. We have a triple lock, so to speak, update it to the right level. Check the checkpoints in here, make sure the most senior person is added in, and then you can complete it. Below here then, but you can also drag and drop any files that apply, building up that audit trail, and also add notes, which are all date stamped, add complaints with files, which are all date stamped, and also gives you prompts, good SMCR, responsibilities and accountabilities activities here. And then below here, you've got good and poor outcomes. Add in your good outcomes for this area. Add in poor outcomes and remedial strategy that you're taking, choose files and so forth. So again, that audit trail is being built. And also a key area which we see firms are missing out on is looking at what changes are you making to your policy and procedures and strategy as a business as a result of the remedial strategy that you're taking. That's really important. That's what the FCA really want to see and have evidenced, to showcase that you're doing really good work about this. You're identifying, not only you're identifying the area, but you're monitoring and managing it and improving it on an ongoing basis, and showcasing the data that you've done that. So once that's done, and you've kind of like completed all that information, you can then go to the board report itself. Now, it takes a little while to download because it's a lot of information, as you can imagine, that we're pulling in. We also integrate with back office providers, IntelliFlow Office, as you can see up here, but also Iris and others. So from that perspective, it will pull whatever data we can get our hands on through there as well, to ensure that it's data driven and it's populating that report. But you can see here, good Blue Peter fashion. Here's one I prepared a little bit earlier, just before today's call. And this gives you an idea of how the board report pulls together all the relevant information. So you've got all clickable links on here. So it will give you an introduction, executive summary, cover the main areas, the cross-cutting rules, the governance areas, the 4 outcomes, vulnerability, data, MI, and reporting, and a summary. Gives you an introduction, gives you an overview of how the heat mapping works, pulls in that slide I showed you earlier, which is all that relevant information that needs to go into the board report. Now, if you've done the good work on the board report already, which ideally you should have done by now, and you stress tested it, dry run through, which again you should have done by now, great. You could use something like this to benchmark the good work that you've done, blend it together, or transfer onto Model Office. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, all we want is firms like your good selves to showcase that you've got the evidence, that you are doing all the great work that the FCA want to see that's in place, and you've got that board report, so that you can then use that template on an ongoing basis, as I say, more than once a year, to showcase that you're walking your talk on all that risk management. So then what it's doing is pulling in the overview of the executive summary, which pulls an overview of the total scoring, which I showed you earlier on. It's a fillable PDF, so you can add in notes. So overall outcomes received, overall review of strengths and weaknesses, changes to business strategy and based on findings. And then it will give you these tables, which are basically the action areas, which are all based on the latest regulatory directives, rules, papers. So I mentioned to John before today's call, when we were prepping, that I was on holiday a couple of years ago when TR 2022-5 came out, which was the guidance paper, which is an excellent paper for resource about how to interpret and implement the consumer duty into your business. A lot of these are taken from there, but also from the rule book, so that you ensure that you've got the latest. And again, you can stress test this against what you've already done and all the good work that you've done on your implementation planning. But the key area with Model Office is where we differ. We're all about validating the good work that you've already done. And that's really important to do, because that's again what the FCA are looking for, adding that third line of defense, that you can ensure that you can validate the implementation planning that you've got and it's all up to speed. It meets the criteria on an ongoing basis. It's not once and done, as I mentioned earlier on. So it's the same principle that applies across all these areas. So there's the action tracker areas, consumer duty, culture and governance, the score, but also you can click back at any stage into the completed and incorrectly answered, because we want to keep this positive. It's not, lots of carrot, a little bit of stick, I suppose, but also then pulls in the relevant rules and regulations on the URL links there, provides the relevant information that needs work, that you've worked on. As you work on that, these disappear. And then obviously you've got the actual areas that you can then focus on, which looks at the action area, test findings, person responsible, good outcomes, pass and fail, what your resolution is, date completed, board recommendation, and RAG rate, that particular area as you go through. So it's exactly the same, applies across all these areas of your Consumer Duty Board report that you require to have in place by the 31st of July. And we can see at the end as well, I'll just pull through. As you can see, it's a lot of information that's pulled through. But the most important thing, this becomes your report. It's not just a static report. It's, as I say, it's a fillable PDF, so that then it becomes yours and you personalize it and tailor it to your environment. Finally, but not least, you've got the board approval and you've got the board sign off, again, to all the relevant rules and regs that apply to the Consumer Duty Board report areas. So hopefully that's helpful to understand the type of tools that are out in the marketplace. I'm delighted to say that we've with our relationship and partnership with the Consumer Duty Alliance, as of today, I think, which is being launched, the Consumer Duty Alliance have their own version of Model Office, which is a free version, which is slightly fettered to what I've just shown you, but it will help you gain a context for how the benchmarking works and the outputs on Model Office around the consumer duty itself. Doesn't provide you with the board report, but it will give you that information and context that you will need to understand how it works. So let me stop the screen share, and John, if you can beam on in, good to see you. John, we've got a number of areas and a number of questions that have come through, which are great, and thanks for those questions. But I'd just like to start off really looking at, when it comes to the board report, in your opinion, from your expertise as a compliance professional, how does the firm identify key risks to the business and gain those metrics to indicate good customer outcomes have been received across the 4 outcomes?
Yeah, exactly. That's a big first question. Yeah, I think honestly, I think I'm just going to take a little step back first before I drill into maybe the outcomes. Firstly, I think we should recognise that the board report is actually quite a good opportunity to re-tire kick the implementation work that firms will have done on consumer duty in the first place. I think you mentioned it before, and I really want to echo and sort of reinforce the point that the duty should be an evolving picture. It wasn't a one-stop shop. You know, and the development of improvement and what you're changing should be continuously assessed. I love what you say about potentially doing the board report 4 times a year. I think it is, you know, the annual board report is maybe the more formal, but if you use it almost as an action planner of what you're doing, what you're changing, I think that's quite a logical methodology to follow. I do think it's also really important to reinforce that it's critical that it's not a one size fits all. It should very much be specific to your firm and to how your firm works. We've already mentioned in my brief session before that the two words, data and segmentation. And I think linking the board report to your data and to your client segments and bringing it to life with how your firm operates, I think is really, really critical. I really like your infographic about the different outcomes and the elements that can be assessed and sit underneath that. And I think that's a really useful memory jogger. And I certainly don't intend to look at all of those potential data fields under the 4 sections, but just sort of as some sort of conceptual prompts. I mean, I think if you look at the products and services outcome first, you're clearly going to be analysing your client lifecycle and how that fits with the products. You know, you will have various bits of data, so you'll have your complaints data, you'll have NTU data, etc. And I mean, that's pretty self-evident, and you know, how many recommendations, how many sales, how many new products, how many top-ups, all of that kind of information and data can be pulled into this. But I think what you're trying to need to bring to life for me in this section is how that data links through to your client segmentation, as I've said, and how you can sort of demonstrate that you're using the right products with each of your client segments. So for a lot of the IFA firms, for example, they will want to make sure that their centralized investment proposition is linked to the client segmentation, which is linked to the consumer duty outcome on products and services. Bring that to life specifically to your firm. If we move to price and value, I mean, again, there's a wealth of information you can look at. So client retention, charging levels, how often you've discounted your fees, etc., etc. And I don't, again, intend to list through that. That's pretty self-evident. But I think pulling through an analysis of how you compare with the market, for me, is critical here. You know, look at your client demographic, look at what services you offer, so cash flow modeling, etc., etc. Pull together what you actually do for your client segments, for your different cohorts, and how that interacts and how that models through. Because I think you need to be saying whether your clients are getting good value or fair value for what you're charging. And that needs to therefore be specific to what you actually do, but benchmarked to other similar firms. Do a like-for-like comparison to yourself locally. And then evidence that you're delivering what you promise. So if you say you do cash flow modeling, evidence that you are doing cash flow modeling. Obviously, the FCA's got quite a focus at the moment in relation to whether you've delivered your annual service, and I think take that a step or two further. It's not just have you delivered your annual service, it's also have you delivered all the elements you said you were going to deliver through that annual service. Think about your consumer understanding next. I love client feedback. I've said quite a lot vocally recently on this, I'm about to do a bit more on that. In fact, I think there's been a real negative position on client feedback from the PI industry, and we're the absolute polar opposite. So I think I'm pretty clearly on record as saying that already. But I think it's absolutely essential to help you deal with the consumer understanding piece. Along with, you know, if you use, say, some educational client software like Money Alive, which is another one of the partners along with yourself, Chris, evidence the engagement level you're getting through that, how interactive clients are, things like that really bring to life that understanding. But if you don't, even at a bare minimum, make sure that you're documenting and keeping data on how you ask clients to replay their understanding of what they're getting and what they understood that they were buying. Building that into your process and having data that flows through might be something that I suspect a lot of firms haven't got, and that could be a good thing to build in as an action. I think, just pretty sort of finally on that, and you've mentioned vulnerable customers, and I think I could probably mention vulnerable customer at every step through this. And I think, again, look at what you've done differently for vulnerable customers. So how many have you got? How have you dealt with them? What have you changed in your process? Soft facts like that pulling through into your board report, again, as evidence of good practice, I think is really important.
Thanks, John.
Last but not least, customer support. I think, look at your turnaround times, your SLAs. How quickly do you respond to email? Again, vulnerable clients, client feedback. But last but not least, how have you adopted technology to improve efficiency, or could you adopt technology to improve efficiency? And I think it's things like that that we really need to tease out.
Yeah, thanks, John. And really, really great points there. I'd like to move to data because for me, obviously, being a RegTech founder and an owner, I think we're still seeing, we're seeing some good progress on data, but not enough is probably the best way I can put it in across the market. And what we are seeing is, firms now taking a bit more action, a bit more accountability and responsibility for their data. If they're using third parties, which the majority are, and that's great because outsourcing is a really great business strategy. But I think the important part to look at is what tools do firms use or need in their businesses to monitor, manage, and report on the good outcomes that you were just talking about, the risks associated with complying with the consumer duty, and how is that included in the board report?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And as I said before, I think that data and segmentation, two key words. And this is probably, as you quite rightly said, probably one of the biggest and toughest nuts to crack. I think firms have an awful lot of information. I think we've got the back office system, client data, you've got complaints data if relevant, compliance records, you've got surveys, as I mentioned before, you've got all of this information. What I think firms haven't got is, in a lot of instances, is a hub to actually pull all of that information together. I think having a way of amalgamating and analysing that data in a coherent and simple way is critical. You've mentioned good garbage in, garbage out before. I think that's really critical as well. Make sure you've got good data. I think the FCA most definitely are data led. We know that they're data led. They have been for some time. So it's only logical for you to replicate that and be data led yourselves as firms. And I think we all. I mean, I love spreadsheets, and I'm not going to belittle the use of spreadsheets. I think for a lot of firms, spreadsheets can be very helpful, but they're very, very complex to do something like this with. I think there's almost too much information to do that, especially for mid or large firms. I think it's now impossible to do that manually. So I think the challenge is how you collate that information into a technology platform to actually look and spot trends and analyze the information and prove what you're doing in a coherent way.
So on that one then, John, I mean, what would you say the firms, on this webinar and in general, need to do to ensure data strategy is in place to control the data quality and completeness? Because what we have at Model Office, for example, is a data quality health check. So they can plug into the back office and it will then look at duplicated clients, what missing data fields are. Then they can go and clean up at the click of a button. So really, it's understanding what you would view as a compliance professional with that hat on, looking at that data quality and completeness.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I love a one-liner. We've always used garbage in, garbage out, or rubbish in, rubbish out, depending which version. I'll give you another one here. If it isn't written down, it didn't happen. And I think the reality is I speak to firms all the time, and what they've done is great, and they've given good advice and they give good service, and their customers love them. But the evidence of it is often lacking. The prove how you prove it, and that's often because again, and this isn't me being critical of financial advisors. I think financial advisors are very, very much customer facing. They're great at doing that bit. What they're not very good at doing is actually the detail behind the scenes of getting that information in a coherent way. If nothing else, and your tool is great for signposting where there's missing information, but I think again a really good outcome of the consumer duty on the consumer duty board report would be to do a data cleansing exercise. Spend time actually just going into your back office system and looking at which fields aren't completed. The number of times, I mean, most recently, I would signpost the retirement income review, where the request for information from the regulator was universally met with inability to respond in full detail. An awful lot of firms couldn't provide the information, not because they hadn't done it, I believe, but because they didn't have it in a way that could be reported on or pulled together and used to respond. So, you know, if you spend time on your back office system looking at the data fields and completing them as much as possible, you're at least going to be a step closer to that. So I think having a data cleansing strategy is absolutely critical.
It is, and thanks for that, John. I'd like to add to what you've just said regarding written down. Whereas what our mantra at Model Office is if you haven't got the data, it didn't happen, and if you've got the data, it better have happened. So that's really where
you're right. It's a step further, isn't it? If the first step was if it isn't written down, it didn't happen, but then that written down doesn't give you a way of analysing it. So that written down bit needs to be turned into data and into accessible data.
So one of the areas I'd like to move to is about segmentation, because I'm still not convinced the vast majority of firms have got the segmentation in place in a way that's going to help them. You know, I'm not wrapping them over the knuckles for not doing anything, although, you know, maybe others would. What I'm saying is if you know, what we're talking about is technology built well is a great enabler. It enables us to do, you know, really neat stuff, get that, you know, better quality MI and data, and save some time and costs along the way. For example, what we're up to in automating the Consumer Duty Board report, right? But when it comes to the segmentation piece, it's a similar process. It's a tool that you can use that can help you with, you know, what you're up to on, you know, making sure that, as I mentioned earlier on, that proof of value strategy is in place, that clients are getting the right products for their needs and they're costed in the right way and they're offering value at all times on an ongoing basis. So how granular does the data need to be with regards to specific customer groups?
For me, very. To be honest, I think this is absolutely critical. I mean, you're absolutely right. By the way, I mean, I talk to firms where they often say I only have one client segment, and it might be that they've just purely done it on a wealth, and they don't take clients below a certain wealth point, and they don't target clients above a certain wealth point, and they think that that's it. For me, there really needs to be an element of life stage incorporated into there. I don't think we should ever get to the point where we have industry standard cohorts, because I do think there are such variance from a geographical point of view as well. So what's a high net worth client in Halifax, where I live, is very different from what a high net worth client is in central London. And I know that's an extreme example, but that's why we've got to be careful and think about how you segment your customers based on the needs of your customers and your geographical location. And I think having that flexibility is critical. But that flexibility links to making sure that you're assessing that segmentation and looking at what needs they have at various life stages. So critical for me that it's not just wealth. I think going back to the consumer duty analysis point, I mean, I think if you've got built into there, you know, accumulation, decumulation at a bare minimum, along with maybe a wealth measure as well, then the elements and the processes that you're going to use, and the service levels and the risk mitigation levels that you're going to look at for an accumulation versus a decumulation are very, very different. So therefore, you've got to be able to pull out the data at client segmentation level so that you can look at different measures for each of your cohort. I don't see how you could do the analysis at consumer duty level on a global position and not link it to your individual segmentation. And I agree. I'm afraid I've been banging this drum for a long time about having your segmentation, spending time to understand the needs of each of your cohorts, and then linking your service and your charging delivery to that need. And I think that for me is absolutely critical.
Yeah, and that's great, John. Thanks for that. I mean, what I'd like to add to that as well is that, as I mentioned in the presentation piece, that all the firms on this call who are involved in financial advice and planning and wealth management do great work understanding their clients, right? All the good firms out there know their clients better than anything. It's why they exist. That relationship piece is really deep. We call it high relationship capital. And the key to that is the soft facts, not just the hard facts, right? So it's that quant versus qual that you kind of mentioned, which is really key. And again, tools out there, like BareRock and us and Money Alive, you mentioned, and others, can offer really good, facilitating tools so that firms can actually capture that qualitative information as well as the quantitative stuff, and then report it in meaningful format. Going back to what you were saying regarding TR 2441. I'd like to move to risk and root cause. Before I do that, quick question. We've had one in from an anonymous attendee, but does BareRock cover firms who are active in the DB market, the pension transfer market?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is we obviously look at the risk of that firm. So going back to good companies in good companies, yes, absolutely, we will insure firms that have done DBs well. And clearly what we're not going to do is insure the firms that ran roughshod through it and created the problem for all of the other good firms in the first place. So on a selective basis, most definitely, yeah, we will.
Thanks, John. So risk, root cause, remedial strategy, because as I showcased, hopefully, that was clear in the automated version that we've got. We capture that information and then we pull it through to the automated board report. And it's really important that firms aren't getting too carried away. Not that they will, but I'm sure, but they're not getting too carried away with all the good stuff, because it's easy to focus on that, where they've got to put a bit of spade work, if you like, into improving areas that they might be falling short in. But this is really front and center of where the FCA are in their implementation and validation piece, which is really important, where firms need to be. So first question really that I've got for you is, how does the firm identify the root cause for poor outcomes and risks to good outcomes, which I think is a really nice kind of like conundrum.
It is. I'm going to be quite positive here, if I'm honest. I think for me, I think the harder barrier is the awareness. I think once firms have analysed and looked at data and looked at a lot of the points we talked about before in terms of positive delivery of service and so forth, I think once they see data that points out something isn't happening, and I've seen this quite a few times over the years with firms, that there's that self-realization moment. And actually, I think the root cause and the remedy is actually the easier part of the process. And I think good firms, when they look at what a piece of data that points out a failing, I think the actual common sense fix is normally pretty evident. It might be, well, actually, we need a slicker process through this, where there's too many people touching a piece of data, and that's why that's going wrong, because it's getting lost through that process, or there's time delays through that process. And what can we do to automate that step? So I think things like that tend to naturally come from the awareness. And again, you mentioned it before. I think, I really don't want to be critical about the financial advisor marketplace. And I think you quite rightly said that financial advisors really do understand their clients, and they're really good at it. They're just not very good necessarily at having that properly documented. And I think the same here. I think most financial advisors really know that what they want to deliver to clients. And as soon as they realize maybe where that's failing and not working, I think that they will fix it. And I think we're already starting to see very, very positive signs of firms doing exactly that. I think just skipping to one methodology that I think is always useful. When you see a piece of data that looks like it's highlighting a problem, it's actually a sales technique that you use to understand client objectives, but it's usable for a root cause analysis. Use the 5 why methodology. Ask yourself, well, why is that a problem? Well, but then why is that happening? But then why? Till you drill down to what it is that's actually causing the problem. Because I mean, it's common sense, but I just think it's a good technique. And if you follow that, you actually drill down to the lowest point where you go, this is actually because that email isn't being sent efficiently, or whatever it might be. Yeah, there's lots and lots of third party help, not least yourself, to be fair, to help understand root cause and to help signpost that. But I do firmly believe that firms will fix it when they're aware of the problem.
Thanks, John. We're coming up to the end of our time, but one last quick question for you around this area is, what would you say, what products, terms or pricing structures, cost structures, distribution practices should the firm look to terminate or change to and showcase how they're doing that in their board report, if necessary?
Yeah, I mean, so firm specific. It's going to vary greatly from firm to firm. I mean, I think I've seen a lot of firms and I'm going to use the phrase status quo bias. And I know the regulators used this before with platform due diligence, but again, it equally works well here. I think firms work in a certain way and have been stuck working in a certain way. And we saw this with RDR. I think an awful lot of firms, when RDR banned commission, they adopted the same commission charging structure, but just turned it into a fee. And what I've seen lately, over the last couple of years especially, is a real challenge of some of those status quo positions. A lot of those, this is how we've always done it type positions. And I think it's those that are starting to change. I've seen lots of firms change their charging structure properly this time over the last few years. I've seen a lot of firms bring in technology to automate processes, to remove the manual, which, by the way, any manual process for me is automatically a risk trigger. The more you can automate your processes from a consistency and an accuracy point of view, that's hugely de-risking. But it's also a massive efficiency position. And I think, should we be doing everything manually and charging clients lots, or should we be automating and using all of this wonderful technology that's come into the market in the last decade and finding a way of being as efficient as possible and therefore being able to charge clients more? And I think that kind of challenge is what I'm seeing firms do really proactively and really well at the moment.
Great. Thanks, John. We're probably right at the end of our session today. And I want to extend a big thanks to you, good self, for taking the time out. Being
Not a problem at all. The fact that me and you overrun because we talk too much is not a surprise to anybody on the planet.
We're on time on this one.
Well, just about.
Yeah, we're on time. But thanks so much. Very much appreciated, John. And just to finalize, if you want more information about our automated solution on the board report, or if you want information on our infographics on this, and information on BareRock and the good work that they're doing in the PII space, we will send out the full slide deck to you. John, you okay with your slides?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll probably reach out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll send that out to you with a copy of this recording, so you've got that with the full contact details to get in touch with us. And I'd just like to finalize and say thanks so much for everybody who's attended today. We wish you well on your Consumer Duty Board journey, and don't be afraid to reach out, because the most important thing is that myself and John, can help you with our technologies, is that data piece. Remember, if you haven't got the data, it didn't happen. If you got the data, it better have happened. Thanks for your time. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.